The 152nd day of class, and today's class had to do with key events and concepts of the Cold War. And we're going to say ballpark 1945 to 1991. Now, some people said it was 46 with Iron Curtain speech, or 47, 48. So give or take a couple of years after World War II, all the way to 91. And some people say 89 with the Berlin Wall, or they wait till the Soviet Union falls. Let historians bicker over that. So ballpark, we're talking about 45 years or so after World War II. And the emphasis in class was to communicate with others. You took about 10, 15 minutes, you researched, and then the big point of emphasis, I wanted you to get the information across to the people in a way they understand. So let me address some of the rebuttals I got in class. Now, number one, they say, hey, I'm not a teacher. Why aren't you doing your job? Why aren't you teaching? Hopefully I did at the end. But here's my point to you. All of you will be a teacher someday. If you have a child, you will be a teacher. You will need to get information across to them. If you work in a job, you have a new hire, you have to train that new hire, you will be a teacher. So I really believe in my heart of hearts, getting information across to people in an understandable way is a skill every one of you has to have. Number two, when you say teaching, any simpleton can cut and paste something from Wikipedia, Google, slap it on a PowerPoint, and recite the words. That is not teaching. And some people were doing that. They would find a definition, and they would recite the definition. I was hoping you went a little deeper, that you were able to explain it to people, which brings me to point three. Good teaching comes from knowing your audience. You're talking to your classmates. Don't make it too eggheady. Don't make it too lofty. Don't throw a lot of details in they don't need. Know your audience. Use examples, stories, analogies, similes. That is real teaching, not reciting some definition. And using plain language that everybody understands. Now, I understand sometimes I pepper some SAT words into the mix. That is by design. I am using words larger than I have to in the hopes it helps you when you take your SAT. But in this sense, don't use language they don't understand. Use language they do understand. And number four, I want to share with this technique with people who don't do very well in school. A lot of people who don't do well in school, it's not an intellect issue, it's a focus issue. And a lot of times, these people with focus issues will sit in front of their book or their computer, what have you, and really mean well and say, I'm going to sit here and read this for an hour straight. It doesn't happen. That's very passive learning. Now, a technique that I feel is very good, I use it myself, I've seen it be successful with my students, is you become the teacher. You take that study guide in any class and you are active with it. You teach others with it. And if you've never tried that technique and you're not doing so hot in school, give it a whirl. So those are the big four key points from the day. Now on to the actual Cold War history. And here is our unit, Unit 6, and it's all about this. Cold War, and Cold War. We'll get to these two in a little bit. So the 8 big areas of history I wanted you to know about was the Yalta Conference. Now the Yalta Conference, you can see, here's Winston Churchill, here's FDR, here's Stalin, the big three. And initially it was going pretty well. They agreed to say, hey, Germany, unconditional surrender. They started talking about the post-war world. Things seemed to be going okay, but then something happened. And I'm going to give you a little rule of thumb. It is best to under-promise and over-perform. People will like you. Don't promise very much, but give them a lot. Now, people will not like you when you over-promise and underperform. So if you look here, Stalin agreed to permit free elections in Eastern Europe. And the Allies are great, or the other two allies are like, great, that's fantastic. It goes along with the way we think. And here, Stalin was supposed to get lands returned to him from 40 years ago. Both sides were hanging their hats on these things. It didn't happen. And if anybody's ever broken a promise to you, you don't feel very good about it. And neither side walked away from the table feeling very good. So it wasn't all lost at this point. And they met again a couple months later. And we see it's a different American here. Here is President Truman, who replaced FDR when FDR died. And you can see the new big three. And again, it was going pretty well. They had a council of foreign ministers, and they had some bureaucracy and some logistical things in place to how to handle Germany. And, they said, hey, Nazis need to be punished. Here's what we have to do for war criminals, reparations. They also said, hey, Japan, it's time for you to surrender. Things are going well until this. And here at Potsdam, This is what happened. I'm going to give you an analogy here. If you take 4 children and you give them a cool toy, brand new cool toy, and say, here you go, kids, share. It's not going to end well. I've never seen little kids saying, okay, well, I'll take the first half hour and you take the second half hour. It doesn't work like that. Inevitably, they're arguing, they're fighting, and somebody's me. They've had it for too long. It's my turn. Don't ever do that with little kids. So in that analogy, the shiny new toy is Germany. And each of the Allied powers is going to get a piece. Now, Great Britain put its time in. No argument to the peace Britain got. They were there from the beginning. Would not have won World War II without the British. That's not the debatable part. Now, the USSR, they lost more soldiers than any of the other Allied countries. They were there from the beginning. They were fiddling with the Nazis on the Eastern Front there, and it was brutal. And they did the heavy lifting. Now, here's America. We showed up late. We were there half the time they were, and they're saying, hey, look at the peace you got compared to the soldiers we lost and the time we put in. Hey, that's not fair. Hey, Russia, would you have won without us? We saved the day. Oh, yeah? And by the way, France, who was the least effective of the Allied power, is that a pretty good chunk for the nation that didn't help like the others did? So this tension between sharing the new toy really increased the tensions between America and Russia. And then the Iron Curtain. Winston Churchill gives a speech, a public speech, and he says the Iron Curtain has descended across Europe. And he's laying down the line saying, hey, my former friend, my former ally, not so much. And again, when the Russians hear these sorts of things, it's just going to increase that tension. And this white line here across Eastern Europe, this was the dividing line. This was the Iron Curtain. Democratic capitalism and communism. And it was a strong line. It was a heavy division. Truman Doctrine. It's this idea, anywhere in the world, it's communism versus capitalism. We are going to get into the mix. It's the opposite of the Monroe Doctrine. Monroe Doctrine of 1823, we're going to stay out of people's affairs. And we had a choice. America was doing real well in 1947, and instead of hanging back like the Monroe Doctrine, we said, hey, wherever there's communism versus capitalism, we're going to get in the mix. So America traveled to all sorts of fun locations like Korea and Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos and Nicaragua and Panama and all over the place because of this doctrine to say, where there is communism, we'll be there. Marshall Plan. Now, the Marshall Plan was $13 billion. In modern times, you can times that by close to 10. There's a lot of money. And what America did is we went into Europe and we rebuilt it. And here's the thing. If you're in Europe, your town's knocked down, you're not getting adequate food, and you don't have a job, and here comes the Marshall Plan. Hey, we're going to rebuild your town. Oh, wow. Hey, here's adequate food. Fantastic. Here's a job. Oh, my God. Are you going to have incredible loyalty to America? And they did. And these are some of the nations that the Marshall Plan helped. But why did it increase the Cold War tensions? Russia wanted to be that person. Russia wanted to be the nation to endear itself to these nations. But you didn't, Russia. America did, through the Marshall Plan. For 3 years, rebuilt the European economy. And guess what? When those Europeans needed stuff, they got it from America, opened up some markets. Now, Berlin, similar to the Potsdam Conference with the whole of Germany, Berlin was supposed to be divided between the other allies. And Russia, me, it's mine. We're going to take it ourselves. We're going to block off the water. We're going to block off the land. And you can't come here, other allies. Well, these people needed supplies, not luxuries. They needed bread and Band-Aids and basic stuff. And America said, oh, you're not going to let us get in there? We're going to get on our planes. We're going to airlift the stuff in there. So, Russia, don't tell us what to do. We're going to do it. Don't tell us. So, Stalin's looking at us saying, wow, they're just giant middle finger in his eyes. And America's saying we did the righteous thing. Again, increased tensions between Russia and America. Containment. You draw the line and you cross the line, we're going to fight. Now, here's the line in Asia, Southeast Asia, Korea, Vietnam. I've done this in class where people in class, all of a sudden, 2 guys get into a fist fight, but they're in my class, or a couple breaks up, and I will split them to 2 far corners of the room and say, hey, you don't cross this line. You don't go here. You don't go here. And if you do, we got a problem. And that's kind of the philosophy. You try to contain people or philosophies in a place so it doesn't spread. Any contentiousness spread. So that's containment. And the last item of the day is the domino theory. Now, the domino theory has been pretty much disproven, but there's this notion if one nation turned communist, the whole area would turn communist. And here's some evidence to the point why it's a flawed theory. After Vietnam, there were some to say, uh-oh, all of Asia is going to turn communist. Case in point, it was just Laos and Cambodia. And the analogy I gave in class, now there are some teachers I work with that say, hey, if one kid talks, the whole class talks. I don't personally believe in that. Now, if one kid talks, I think 2 kids will talk or 4 kids will talk. You don't have to be crazy harsh on that one kid to prevent it, I don't think. But some people do feel that you got to nip it at the bud so it doesn't grow. So those are the 8 big areas of the Cold War that I hope you got across. And I do appreciate everybody giving their best effort and using your voices well to express yourself. And, the history itself is more of an algebraic variable to the skill. But again, practice being able to get information to people. It's a powerful, powerful skill to develop, and I hope you continue to do so. So thank you for watching.